That's accurate regarding your father's legacy. Emily and I will assume control of all the remaining possessions. My mother informed me about this immediately after my father's burial. To be frank, I had no desire to discuss the inheritance on the day my father passed away. However, Emily Everly initiated the conversation with eager eyes. There's a will as well. Emily continued the discussion while presenting the will proudly. Just after Dad went to the hospital, Mom and I visited his room and had him write this. Dad immediately agreed to leave neither inheritance nor anything to you, sis. Dad did that, yeah, he did that, even though he always relied on you. I know it's too harsh. It's pitiful for you, isn't it? But certainly, Dad always found me more agreeable and favored me. No way. Before I could say anything else, my mother continued cheerfully, you, who have no job, we have no intention of giving you a single penny from the inheritance. We'll be enjoying a trip abroad, so prepare to leave this house by the time we return. Wait, how can I accept this? Why would you do such a thing without giving me a chance to speak? Mom and Emily responded coldly, be quiet. It's impossible for you to get anything from us now that Dad's gone. We can finally act freely. Your role here is done, so leave immediately. All the sacrifices you've made for Dad, all you've done for him, and this is the result. How cruel. Giving everything for such an ungrateful father was pointless. Even if you wish for our assistance now, it's belated. Upon hearing those words, any remaining familial sentiments toward my mother and Emily completely vanished. I couldn't embrace what they said about my father, whom I deeply admired. Without articulating all I desired to convey to my mother and Emily, I replied, I comprehend. I cannot remain with you two any further. I will willingly depart. Subsequently, I departed from my childhood abode. My appellation is Ashley. I possess a sister, Emily, who is 4 years junior to me. We constitute a family of 4 with our 2 parents. Emily's disposition resembles that of our mother's. She is agreeable, but at times indolent. She frequently taunted my father and me, who possess earnest dispositions. Our mother, possessing a temperament akin to Emily, exhibited particular fondness for her during our formative years. It was apparent she favored Emily over me. Whenever she encountered her acquaintances, my mother would exclusively take Emily with her, often excluding me. At home, according to her, it is disgraceful to present unassuming and reserved Ashley to my acquaintances. Conversely, my mother was exceedingly proud of Emily, who was amiable and endeared by everyone. Despite having such a mother and sister, the rationale I could lead my life optimistically was due to my father. He esteemed my sincerity and also cherished Emily equally. I profoundly valued and loved my father's equitable approach. Even subsequent to attaining adulthood, my mother's treatment of me remained unaltered. Nonetheless, owing to my father's presence, our household remained steady. However, subsequent to my father's retirement at 65, an occurrence and incident took place at the residence. He stumbled over a small staircase in the dwelling and fractured his bone. Despite making an effort with surgery and rehabilitation, his aging muscles did not recuperate easily. As he spent more time confined to bed and required assistance, my mother and Emily became even more distant towards him. Hey, Mom, what do you think about this? Yeah, it looks good. The food seems delicious too. Maybe we should go with this one. While perusing a guidebook, my mother and Emily conversed eagerly. What are you discussing? When I inquired, my mother responded with a hint of irritation. We're planning for a family trip, but considering Dad's mobility challenges, isn't traveling hard for him? In response to my remark, Emily said with a grin, well, we're not considering bringing him in the first place. We plan to leave him at home. That's heartless. It would be difficult for him if he's left alone. If Dad's not coming, I will stay home with him. After I stated this, my mother and Emily simply smiled at each other. Following that, my mother said, that's acceptable as well. If that's the situation, Emily and I will just go by ourselves. Whether you two come or not is up to you, but since it's a family trip, we'll be using funds from Dad's bank account. A brief look at the guidebook revealed they had selected a room intended for only 2 people. It was evident they had never intended to bring either my father or me along. After that, My mother and Emily frequently went out by themselves, staying at high-quality inns or dining at reputable establishments, eateries. It was almost as if my father and I were invisible in the residence. I observed their behavior from afar, striving to complete my tasks as swiftly as possible in order to attend to my father. When I couldn't manage everything on my own, I enlisted the help of care services for duties such as aiding with bathing or accompanying my father on brief strolls around the area. On occasions when I had to work extra hours, I requested my mother and Emily to look after my father, but they evaded the responsibility. "Hello, I've come to assist with the bath, but is there no one home today?" Upon receiving a notification from the care service personnel, I promptly called my mother and Emily. Despite having informed them in advance of the staff's visit, they had left my father unattended and gone out. When they eventually returned home, I confronted them, but there was no apology from them. The personnel are experts, right? It's fine even if we're not present. Dad is an adult. He'll be fine being left alone. We don't want our time occupied caring for him like you. It seemed they genuinely believed they were doing nothing wrong. I realized I couldn't depend on them and determined that taking care of my father was my responsibility. I managed work and caregiving. The daily routine was far from simple, especially since neither my mother nor Emily displayed any concern or empathy. My father's condition deteriorated as the days passed. He spent more time seated than walking and consumed much less. As the 9th year of tending to my father approached, I grew worried about how fragile he appeared. When I brought him to the hospital, I received a startling diagnosis. "Your father has advanced cancer." It cannot be. I realized that we might not have much time left with him. Determined to assist him in his final days, I resigned from my job to look after him full-time. I knew I had to inform my mother and Emily. Their responses were unexpected. When I relayed his condition to them, my mother remarked, "Really? He never drank or smoked. It's unfortunate that such an honest person ended up with cancer." Emily, with a shocked expression, said, "I can't believe you'd give up your job to take care of Dad. I'd never make that choice." I thought they would be concerned about him, but they showed no signs of it at all. I was genuinely surprised by their indifference, as if it was someone else's business. In the end, the two of them only visited him at the hospital for a brief time and never truly came to pay a proper visit. I supported him daily during his chemotherapy treatments. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't halt the cancer's progression, and half a year later, he passed away. The days after the diagnosis went by in a haze. Upon learning of his death, my mother and Emily began a private discussion and left me to organize the funeral on my own. Then they'd vanished somewhere. I didn't even have time to grieve for my father as I had to arrange the funeral alone. As the funeral commenced, my mother appeared and began to deliver the principal mourner's address. Despite having accomplished nothing, she maintained a facade for the public. I was annoyed by her conduct, but the funeral proceeded smoothly. Exhausted as I made my way home, I was summoned to the living room by my mother and Emily, who had already returned, stating they had something to discuss. Without any regard for my fatigue, my mother suddenly announced, "Concerning your father's estate, Emily and I will inherit this house and all other assets." Honestly, I wasn't in the mood to discuss inheritance on the very day my father passed away. However, Emily Everly added, "We even have a valid will. Look." She proudly presented a document and began to explain. "Right after Dad was admitted to the hospital, Mom and I visited him and had him sign this. It states that you won't inherit anything." Dad agreed to it immediately. With a smirk, Emily said, "After all the assistance you provided, it's so heartless, isn't it?" Maybe Dad, in the end, favored me over his two responsible elder daughters. "That's impossible." Before I could respond, my mother interrupted with an inappropriate smile. "Clearly, Emily is more endearing, though your father always stayed home and had no hobbies. He surely saved a lot, right? Mom even quit her job because of the inheritance, and I took some time off work to enjoy the inheritance for a while." Before I could say anything, the two of them continued their conversation. My mother then informed me, "You, who have no job, won't get a penny from the inheritance. We intend to enjoy a vacation overseas for some time, so you need to vacate this place by then." I quickly responded, Hold on. Do you truly believe what you're doing is right? If that's the case, without letting me finish, both my mother and Emily firmly replied, "Be quiet. It's futile to try to claim the inheritance from us. With your father gone, we'll do as we please. Your role here is finished. Kindly leave this house promptly." To think that after all you sacrificed for Dad, this is what you get. There was no need to go to such lengths for such an incompetent father. It's pointless to regret and dwell on it now. Hearing those words, any remaining bond I felt for my mother and Emily was completely broken. I couldn't forgive them for speaking that way about my beloved father. Holding back what I wanted to say, I calmly informed them, "I understand your perspective. From now on, I can't envision living together with you two. I'll willingly depart." Despite their initial surprise at my acceptance, the two soon smiled smugly together. Good to know. Once you leave this house, never depend on us again. Our relationship ends here. Whatever happens to you, we want no part in it. Don't even think of reaching out to us. Receiving this intense sentiment from my mother, I packed only my essentials and left the house. A few days after the inheritance discussion, something happened. The unexpected call came from my mother, who had asserted she would sever contact with me. When I answered, I was met with fury. "What have you carried out? Where has all the funds from your father's account vanished to? Why are you abruptly calling? Didn't you state you wouldn't get in touch with me?" Silence. "This is an urgent situation. Give back your father's savings right away." "What are you speaking about? I left the passbook at the old residence, didn't I? I have no means of reaching it after I departed, but the money in the account is undeniably gone. Such a substantial amount of his savings couldn't have vanished so suddenly. I found it suspicious. When you were able to depart so swiftly without a job, it appeared my mother had assumed that I had wasted my father's money. Mom, haven't you ever checked the account balance before? Ha, I haven't bothered with such things. I see. If you had, you would have noticed that Dad's savings weren't that much to begin with. What do you mean, his savings where? Where did his retirement funds go? Oh, we utilized it for our wedding ceremony and the new residence. Wedding? New residence? I have no clue what you're talking about. I had been in a romantic relationship with a man named Sean, who was in charge of the caregiving service for my father. Our relationship started through our mutual care for my father. I had informed my father about my relationship with Sean shortly after we began dating. Sean proposed. At that time, I was overwhelmed with caregiving and work responsibilities and couldn't make a decision. Upon learning the truth, my father said, "Care for yourself more than me." I won in order to achieve a happy marriage. He encouraged and supported me. Despite my doubts, he even began assisting with the selection of the wedding venue and searching for a new place to live. We had set a wedding date for the next year and also signed a contract for a new apartment that my father approved of. All of this occurred 6 months before we learned about his terminal cancer. As a token of appreciation, my father covered most of the expenses for the wedding and the new apartment. This was the cause of the decrease in the account balance. Upon hearing the turn of events, my mother's voice trembled. She was clearly shaken. So there wasn't any inheritance for us to receive in the first place? Mainly just the family home, but considering its location, we shouldn't anticipate a high selling price. Emily, who had overheard the conversation, grabbed the phone from my mother in panic. Wait, so the financial aid for your wedding is much greater than the inheritance for Mom and me? That appears to be the situation. Dad was aware of my marriage and my departure from the house, so perhaps he didn't see an issue in leaving the family home to both of you. He might have allocated a significant amount for me and intended the inheritance to compensate for that. Could it be that the reason you resigned from your job was because your marriage had been decided upon? That's correct. Sean is also engaged in investment activities and is financially secure. He wanted me to become a full-time homemaker. Additionally, I thought if I resigned early, I could concentrate on looking after our father. I cannot believe it. Why did you conceal the information about your marriage and savings from us? Inhaling deeply, I responded. I contemplated informing you multiple times, but each time, neither of you displayed any interest and evaded the subject. Why did you not prevent me from taking a hiatus from work or mom from resigning her part-time job? How are we meant to survive now? When I sought to converse with you after the funeral, was it not you and mom who dismissed me, stating you cannot anticipate anything from us? But I believed relatives should support each other. Family, when I was overwhelmed with work and caregiving, you were out enjoying yourselves, disregarding Dad. How can I consider someone who uttered such unkind remarks as family? Do not simply utter whatever is expedient for you. Stunned and at a loss for words, Emily was surprised. Later, my mother implored with me, Ashley, the reality is I have already paid for the journey. I also made various purchases, anticipating the inheritance. So now I have no savings remaining. So what of it? I have already resigned from my part-time job, correct? If we do not receive any inheritance funds, we will not have any money for next month. So until I secure a new job, I hope you can loan us some. When you evicted me from the family residence, did you not declare you would never approach me again? That our connection was terminated, that you would not meddle with whatever befalls me in the future? Regarding that, neither of you ever assisted when Dad and I were enduring challenging times. Now that you're facing difficulties, do you expect me to be your support? That's remarkably audacious. But if you refuse to assist us now, what other options do we have? I promptly ended the call and blocked their numbers without allowing my mother to finish. I was thoroughly repulsed by my mother and sister, who only acknowledged our relationship when they are in trouble. I made the decision to create some distance between myself and these two. Later, I learned from various sources that despite my mother and Emily canceling their trip, they were unable to receive a refund due to it being a last-minute cancellation. They have been struggling financially, seeking money from friends and relatives. They had to sell their house, but as I anticipated, they did not receive as much money as they had hoped for. After covering the initial expenses for a new place and moving costs, they had very little money remaining. Emily went back to work, but her relationships with her colleagues became strained because she had asked them for money. She had intended to leave her job after finding a suitable partner, but due to the circumstances, that partner and other men distanced themselves. Her friends also distanced themselves. My mother attempted to find another part-time job, but her previous workplace had already hired someone else, making it difficult for her to return. Because of her age, her job prospects were limited. She has been working hard, facing complaints from younger colleagues. Currently, they are managing their living expenses with my mother's modest part-time salary and Emily's earnings, slowly paying off their debts. Both of them appear exhausted. As for me, I managed to hold an intimate wedding at the location my father selected. The only sorrow is that my father couldn't attend my wedding, but I think he's observing our joyful moments from somewhere. My marital life with Sean has been more seamless than anticipated. We're relishing tranquil and satisfying days together. I'm endlessly thankful to my father for backing my connection with Sean and affording me this chance. I've had to construct a serene life with my spouse, always keeping in mind my appreciation to my father.